أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. لله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Gives me great pleasure to introduce Shaykh Saad Tasleem, who's our guest khatib for this Friday. As many of you know, he's been here before. He was here last year. He delivered the khutbah and also did a program for the YP Young Professionals program. He's a graduate of UMD. He studied fashion and psychology, and then he proceeded to continue studies at Medina University, where he graduated in Islamic law and Sharia. And he travels all over the country, all over the world. He does a lot of charity work, especially for Syrian refugees in various different countries. And he's been active in the Al-Maghrib Institute in teaching Islam. And so it's really a great pleasure and an honor. Even though he's here in Maryland, I think he's hardly in Maryland. So we're lucky to catch him in one of those days, alhamdulillah. For those that enjoy the khutbah, I'd like to invite you to please register for tomorrow's program. A lot of people are saying they're coming to tomorrow's program at 6 o'clock, but they didn't register. So please register so we know that you're coming and so we have a meal for you, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters, there's a very peculiar, very interesting incident that is narrated by the mother of the believers, al-Mu'mineen Safiyyah radiyallahu anha wardaha, in the Sahihain. She tells of an incident that occurred one night when she went to visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was in the masjid. She says she went to go visit him and she spent some time with him. And then at some point during the night, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided to walk her home. And Safiyyah radiyallahu anha, she says, as we were walking home, we saw two men. And she actually said they were two men from the Ansar. So two Sahaba, two companions. She said, as they looked upon us, they started to walk away quickly. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon seeing that, he said, don't rush. فَإِنَّ هَذِهِ صَفِيَّةٌ فَإِنَّ هَذِهِ صَفِيَّةٌ بِنْتُ حُيَيٍّ. He said, don't rush. This is Safiyyah, the daughter of Huyay. He was identifying the woman that he was with in the middle of the night. And so what he is saying to these companions is, don't assume anything bad or anything wrong. Don't make the assumption, this is not literally said in the hadith, but this is what is understood from what is happening here. The Prophet ﷺ is telling these two companions, don't make any bad assumptions. Don't think anything wrong that somehow I am out alone with someone who I'm not related to. This is Safiyyah bint Huyay. He identifies who exactly she is. And they respond, because they are companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and they say, Ya Rasulullah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Ya Rasulullah. What they're saying is, glory be to God, glory be to Allah, Subhanallah, we would never assume something bad of you. And the Prophet ﷺ replies with something very, very interesting. He says, Inna shaytan yajri min al-insan majra ad-dam. He says, certainly the shaitan flows through human beings like the flowing of blood. وَإِنِّي خَشِيتُ, he said, I feared. وَإِنِّي خَشِيتُ أَن يَقْذِفَ فِي قُلُوبِكُمَا سُوءًا. And I feared that as the shaitan is so close to us, as he flows through us like the flowing of blood, and that's a very close and intimate connection. He says, I feared that the shaitan would put some bad thought into your hearts. And so what do we learn here from this hadith? This is an amazing hadith. We learn first and foremost that the shaitan has the ability to influence us and we may not be aware of it. Because the companions, these two Ansari men, they said, "Oh Rasulullah," what they're saying is, we wouldn't assume bad of you. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying, yes, you're right. I don't think that you would think bad of me, but perhaps you're not aware that the shaitan can influence you. Perhaps if you don't protect yourself from the shaitan, if you don't put your guard up, then the shaitan can put a bad thought into your hearts. And we also learn here that the battleground of the shaitan, where the shaitan attacks, is our hearts. Why? Because the hearts, my brothers and sisters, are the key to everything. The Prophet ﷺ in an authentic hadith, he said, "Ala inna fil jasadi mudgha." Certainly in the body there's a piece of meat, there's a piece of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. He said, if it's doing okay, if it is sound, if it's healthy, and this is not the physical health, this is speaking about the spiritual health. If it is doing okay, then the rest of the body will be okay. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. If it is ruined, if it is corrupted, then the rest of the body will be corrupted as well. Meaning that our actions, our behavior, our attitude, all will follow the status of our hearts. He said, "Ala wa hiya al-qalb," this morsel of flesh, which we think of it as not a big deal. If we take a look at it from the perspective of anatomy, yeah, we need it to pump blood into the rest of our body and so on and so forth. But in a spiritual sense, the Prophet ﷺ is reminding us of the importance of purifying and rectifying the status of our hearts and protecting our hearts from corruption, protecting our hearts from outside influences that may ruin a normally sound and pure and good heart. For my brothers and sisters, the asl, the default of human beings, the default of Muslims as well, and this is part of our aqeedah, this is part of our creed, that the default of human beings is good, as opposed to some other beliefs and some other traditions who may believe that, human beings are born sinful and they're born evil and so on and so forth, and then whatever else. Our aqeedah, our faith, our creed is that the nature of human beings, the default state of human beings is that we are good, and that it is outside influences that may corrupt the nature and may corrupt the status of our heart. So the Prophet ﷺ has over and over again reminded us to protect our hearts from bad influences. And in this particular situation, what the Prophet ﷺ is warning the companions of is bad assumptions. Is when the door is left open, that we don't walk through that door towards evil. That when there's a blank, we don't fill that blank with something which is bad. Because my brothers and sisters, when there is a blank in front of us, when there is an unknown, we're faced with a decision. We either make a good assumption, we give someone the benefit of the doubt, we see something, we're not really sure about it. We can either assume good and say, since I'm not sure, I'm going to assume the best, or we can assume the worst, or we can assume that which is bad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O believers, ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann. Beware of making a lot of assumptions. Why? فَإِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. Because from those assumptions is sin, or is sinfulness. And our scholars tell us that one of the meanings here is that if someone is always making assumptions, they're going off of their assumptions, then eventually this person will end up in sinful behavior or will end up committing sins. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ warned us. He said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالظَّنِّ. He said, I warn you of making assumptions, of going off of something that you're not sure of. فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبُ الْحَدِيثِ. He said, dhann, assumptions, is the worst of speech. Because assumptions lead us to open the door for the shaitan to fill in, as we said, those blanks. That when we are not sure, what the shaitan does is the shaitan clouds our minds. The shaitan, even though we haven't seen anything for sure, the shaitan makes us feel that this is for sure. How many times have we seen someone who assumes something about someone else, and then from a third party perspective or from an outsider's perspective, you can say, well, are you really sure that's what they meant? Are you really sure this is why they did this certain action? And the person says, I'm sure. Even though they're not sure, even though there's no way to actually be sure. But they say, I'm sure she did this because of this, or he did this because of this. This confidence in our assumption, where is it coming from? It's coming from allowing the shaitan to influence us, for the shaitan to put bad thoughts in our mind and in our hearts. You know, the early scholars, they have a very famous statement. I'm sure many of you have heard this statement. Imam al-Bayhaqi narrates it on one particular scholar. He says that if you see something bad from your brother or your sister, then make excuses for them, up to 70 excuses. And I know we've all heard this, 70 excuses. What's interesting about this statement is that, subhanAllah, we all may know this, but how many of us make 70 excuses? And even in Arabic, when there's a large number mentioned like that, sometimes people start counting 1 excuse, 2 excuses. It is not meant exactly 70. It is meant make as many excuses as you can. Give them the benefit of the doubt in as many ways as you can, but it doesn't stop there. Because a person can say, look, I saw someone do this, or they said this to me, and maybe they're doing it for this reason, a good assumption. Well, that doesn't make sense. You think of another assumption, and then at some point you may run out of good assumptions. And so the scholars would say, if you run out of good assumptions, then say to yourself, perhaps this person has a good reason to do it that I don't know about. لَعَلَّ لَهُ عُذْرًا لَا أَعْرِفُهُ. Perhaps he has a reason. Perhaps he or she has an excuse to say this or do this or whatever it may be that I simply can't think of. And you know what that does for us? That protects us. Because when the shaitan comes and says, you've thought of everything, you've given them all the excuses in the world, and how many times do we hear people say that? You gave them all the excuses in the world. That we can say, no, that's not enough. Because perhaps they have an excuse that I don't know about. And one of the problems that we have, subhanAllah, is a lot of times we judge people based off of our own experiences. And so if we have experienced bad, and we see someone do something, we assume that they must have a bad reason as well. When the reality is that everyone faces different circumstances. And the reality of my hearts, my brothers and sisters, is this is one of those issues that if I were to ask any of us, that do you tend to give people good assumptions? Do you tend to give people the benefit of the doubt? I think most people would say yes. Yeah, I'm a good person. I'm a positive person. If I see something, I'll try to give someone the benefit of the doubt. The reality is we don't know until we are tested. We don't know until something happens that affects us. We don't know until something happens that affects us directly, because that is when we are tested, and that is the true sign of patience. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ عِنْدَ صَدْمَةِ الْأُولَى. He said, patience is not later. Patience is not, something happened and, you think back and you say, oh, I was patient. Patience is when the calamity hits, when things are seemingly out of control, when things are out of our control, when we're feeling wronged, when we're feeling upset, when our emotions are heightened. That is the moment that we need patience. That is the true test of a person's patience. Likewise, if we talk about giving people the benefit of the doubt, making good assumptions about people, it's not later. We can all make good assumptions about people that we like, right? I'm sure your loved ones are people that you like and you look up to. And so if I asked you, do you give them the benefit? Of course, it's easy to give people the benefit of the doubt when we like them. But how about when we don't like someone? How about when we feel that someone is wrong? Can we give them the benefit of the doubt? Because one of the ways we do that, my brothers and sisters, one of the ways that we can give someone the benefit of the doubt is to empathize. What does empathy mean? Empathy means we put ourselves in their position. And my brothers and sisters, there's not a single person here in this masjid today who would say, I don't want someone to assume good of me. We all want for ourselves that people assume good of us. We all want that people give us the benefit of the doubt. That you say, look, if you didn't know, you should have asked me. If you didn't know, you should have assumed good. Don't you know me? And then if something we have said is wrong, how many times have we said something to someone and someone's like, I don't like it. That's not okay. It's not right. And you say to them, that's not what I meant. Because what do we want? We want people to assume good of us. What do we want? We want people, if they don't know, to make a good assumption. We want people to judge us not based off of our actions, but based off of our intentions. Because our actions may have had some bad outcome. But we say to people, no, think this is not what my intention was. And so if we can empathize with someone, if we can say to someone that, we've seen something bad or wrong from them or whatever it may be, and now the shaitan is flooding our mind with bad assumptions, we say, if I was in that position, would I want my brother or my sister to make a good assumption for me? Or would I want my brother and sister to give in to the first bad thought or negative thought that this person had? The reality is, my brothers and sisters, that this is a really hard problem to deal with because, as I said in the beginning, this problem occurs in our hearts. And no one has access to our hearts except ourselves. No one can come to you and say to you, listen, here's a problem that you have, you need to fix it, unless we open up to people. But we know our hearts better than anyone else. And so this is one of those issues that no matter what I say here today, it will make no difference until we internalize it and say to ourselves, listen, this is a problem in my own heart. And this, my brothers and sisters, is a human problem. Because as we saw in the incident of Safiya radiallahu anha, that, the companions, the Prophet ﷺ, he considered them, ﷺ, the best of generations. If they could be susceptible to thinking bad, then how can we feel that we are safe? That we're not going to be put in a position that we may begin to think bad of someone. And not only that, who was that assumption being made about by those two Ansari men? An average person? No, by the best human being to walk the face of the earth. If someone can think bad about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then how can we feel that we are safe? And sometimes, brothers and sisters, we are offended when someone thinks bad of us, when someone makes a bad assumption of us, especially if it's a loved one, right? We say, don't you know me? Don't you understand? How could you think this of me? And the reality is, my brothers and sisters, is that this is it's a natural problem. That when we leave the door open, the shaitan enters through the door. Because the shaitan will not make you believe something. The shaitan will never force our hand. The shaitan cannot do that. The shaitan tells us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, that the shaitan will say to mankind on the day of judgment, that I had مَا كَانَ لِيَ عَلَيْكُم مِّن سُلْطَانٍ. He will say, I had no authority over you. I couldn't force you to do anything. The shaitan opens the door. The shaitan gives us ideas. And then it's up to us to walk through that door or not. The shaitan says, إِلَّا أَن دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. The only thing I did is I called you, I invited you, and you walked right through that door. You answered the call. And so, my brothers and sisters, it is upon us that when we are in that moment of having a bad assumption about someone, it is for us to say, do I have the ability to cut off those negative thoughts and to think well of my brother or my sister? أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وسيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters, we may think to ourselves, okay, you just spent the first khutbah talking about how we should give people the benefit of the doubt. We should give our brothers and sisters the benefit of the doubt. But why? Why can't I just think bad? Why can't I just, I'm a negative person, someone may say, that's just who I am. Just let me be. Well, the problem with that is, as I alluded to in the first khutbah, that our hearts dictate our actions. That even it may start as a negative thought, a negative feeling, but if we let it linger, if we let it go, eventually it's going to turn into action. And that is why many of the sins, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, don't make a lot of assumptions, because some of assumptions lead to sin. What are those sins? Well, when we begin to assume bad things about people, then it'll transfer into sins. We may end up speaking bad about someone. We made an assumption, so-and-so did this, and now we go tell someone, so-and-so did this, and now what are we doing? We're backbiting. What are we doing? Possibly slander, ghiba and namima. These sins, which are major sins in Islam, major sins. Where did they come from? How did it happen? It happened because we made an assumption. And I know still right now, some of you are probably thinking, that's not me. I'm immune to that. Let me give you an example. One of the ways that we make assumptions today, and this is a modern manifestation of bad assumptions, is this device right here. Ways of communication. So how do we communicate? A lot of times we communicate electronically, we can communicate through messages. If you have an iPhone, iMessage, or if Allah's not blessed you with an iPhone, you have to stick with an Android, WhatsApp, whatever it may be, messages. And sometimes we read a message and we think to ourselves, I can't believe this person said this. Or how wrong is this person for saying this? And we think we know exactly what the person meant and exactly what their intentions are. So let me give you an example. There's a statement that I'm going to say, and I want you to think about what you understand from it. I never said she stole your money. I'll say it again. I never said she stole your money. Now, this is one of those statements that if written out, depending on which word you emphasize, can have a different meaning. It's made up of 7 words, 7 different meanings. I never said she stole your money. Meaning what? I didn't say it. Perhaps somebody else said it. I never said she stole your money. Meaning I never said that. Never, ever, ever. I never said she stole your money. I may have alluded to it. I may have, signaled, but I never said it. I never said she stole your money. Maybe somebody else, but I never said she stole your money. I never said she stole your money. Maybe somebody else's money, but not yours. I never said she stole your money. Maybe your car, maybe something else, but not your money. 7 different meanings from one sentence. And that's when it's typed out. How do we know? How do we know what this person meant? And so my brothers and sisters, this is why I always tell people, if you're in conflict with someone, if you have a problem, if you don't like something that they said, and you have an issue with someone, put the phone away. Get off of messaging, or if you saw someone post something online that you didn't like, get away from the comments, go and speak to the person. Because even calling them, someone says, you know what, forget messages, I'll call the person. Calling is still better than typing. But if we talked about empathy, feeling what a person is feeling, putting yourself in their position, studies have shown that one of the things that builds empathy is just connection. Just being in the same room with someone helps us empathize with them, helps us humanize them, makes them a real person. Have you ever wondered why people say all types of things online that they would never say in person? People will say things to you online, and sometimes you think, like, I know this person, like, why would they say that? Well, because online, there's a disconnect there. But when you're face to face with someone, naturally there's a level of empathy there. So if you ever have conflict with someone, if you're ever making these bad assumptions, go speak to the person. Because the goal here is to cut those negative thoughts from the shaitan. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ taught us one statement that immediately puts an end to those negative thoughts, to those influences from the shaitan. The Prophet ﷺ said, say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah from the accursed shaitan. Because remind yourself, what is the shaitan's goal? The shaitan's goal is conflict. How much conflict can be avoided in our ummah, in our communities, in our homes, in our relationships, if we simply gave each other the benefit of the doubt until we were absolutely sure that the person meant what they meant, they said what they said because that's what they meant. clarity. The shaitan loves conflict. And we know this in numerous instances. And the Prophet gave us one example that the shayateen, one of the things that they do is they go out and they cause conflict between people, and that makes the shaitan, Iblis, very, very happy. And so ask yourself, who is benefiting from this bad assumption? Is this relationship benefiting? Is my community benefiting? Is my relation is my family benefiting, or is the shaitan benefiting? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us refuge, provide us refuge from the accursed shaitan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jalla wa ala to protect us from bad assumptions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to say that which is good or remain silent. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, inna Allah amarakum bis salati was salam ala nabiyhi wa qal إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الخلفاء الراشدين أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وأن سائر الصحابة وآل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار قوموا لصلاتكم يرحمكم الله.
Jazakallahu khairan for a beautiful khutbah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and also put it in the mizan of hasanat, the scale of good deeds of Shaykh Saad's mother who passed away 1 month ago. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy and forgiveness on her soul. As you know, Shaykh Saad, he started to talk about the sunnah of connecting. Tomorrow's program is at 6 p.m. It's on connecting with the sunnah of connecting, which I think is a very special subject and close to learning about the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and celebrating his life. So you invite everybody to please register for that program. And then on Sunday, we have our biggest event of the year. Every year we hold the annual Mawlid program. That's at 11 a.m. Please sign up to bring a dish and come with the whole family as well. There's no registration for that except for the dish. Also, we have a few dua requests. Brother Sayyid Muhammad Hadiyuz Zaman, he passed away in Bangladesh. He was a professor. And then Sister Musumi Sultana also passed away. Allahumma ghfir lahum warhamhum wa'afihim wa'afu anhum wa'akrim nuzulahum ووسع مدخلهم واغسلهم بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقهم من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس. Also, some of our community are sick. Brother Nur Zaman, Imamuddin, Sister Sharmeen Hai, and also Sister Nida Maiman's mother, Hurbano, she's in the ICU. They're all sick. May Allah give them shifa'an ajilan la yughadiru saqama. Barakallahu fikum. And inshallah we'll proceed with the iqamah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا
Please stand close to one another. Do not leave any gaps. Pray as if it is your last prayer. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Salam everybody. We have one more treat for you. I'm happy to share the news that we will be welcoming Toya. She's taking her Shahada, so we'll welcome her to Islam and to the ICCP family as soon as I figure. Oh, there you are. Excuse me. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. So we'll say it in English first and then in Arabic. All right.
I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship other than the one God who has no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger and his servant. Ashadu Allah ilaha illa Allah wahadu la sharika lahu washaru anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu.
Takbir. Allahu Akbar. All right. And we have a little something from ICCP to get you going, inshallah. And you have, of course, your friend Aisha and the whole community, inshallah, become part of your family. Don't be a stranger. Don't just, overwhelm her with hugs. Give her your number